Live. All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Wolf. Happy Thursday, to everybody. Holy moly, Bitcoin is literally at all-time highs. It is a crazy time to be alive, and so I am ecstatic to be joined by Eric Semler. He is the chairman of Semler Scientific, trailblazer in the Bitcoin adoption world. They've accumulated a good amount of Bitcoin, I'll say that. And for a lot of people who are in, especially the public trading world, they're a pretty big deal in that arena, adopting the Bitcoin standard, which is a big time deal in the world of the United States and the companies, and being a trailblazer just about a year ago. So Eric, it's great to have you here. Really excited to chat.
Great, and I love that word trailblazer because that's my team. I'm from Portland.
Hey. Yes, sir.
But I'm sticking with them.
That's awesome. So, well, listen, my first question here is more like on sort of like the journey to Bitcoin, but also like personal convictions. And I'd love to know like your personal beliefs and experiences that influenced the Bitcoin strategy for your company. I mean, that's a big deal to move your company and buy that amount of Bitcoin when it's still a volatile asset. I'm sure a lot of your friends were like, wow, that's a big move right there, you know?
For sure, definitely. And, you know, I feel like we have a special place in history because we really were the second U.S. public company to adopt the Bitcoin standard after MicroStrategy. And this was happening in parallel in Japan, obviously, Metaplanet. We were literally kind of like synchronized, not knowing that. But
yeah.
we did do it with a lot of kind of uncertainty around it. Like we didn't know how our shareholders would react. It was uncharted waters for us. And even though MicroStrategy had so much success, I mean, we were a healthcare company that a lot of people just weren't paying attention to. And we were looking for electrification, you know, in our stock and maximizing shareholder value. And so this is where this was kind of a natural place for us to go in retrospect. But at the time, it seemed pretty unclear if it was gonna, you know, be the right move.
Yeah, definitely. Has integrating Bitcoin into the company's operations like influenced corporate culture or the employees in any way? Like, how's that been for the people working at the company as well?
You know, I think it's been a godsend, even though we're a virtual company for the most part. So we're not really congregating, you know, in one space a lot. But so my interaction, I'm chairman of the company. I'm not the CEO. So I don't have a ton of interaction with management. But I believe that Bitcoin really has been such a huge value creator for us. Our stock's up it's up a lot since we announced the strategy almost a year ago. It's up, yeah, I think something like 85-90%. So wow. Yeah, it's good. I'd love it to be higher than that, but at least we can. You know, we've had intense headwinds in our medical business. Ironically, we didn't expect that. We thought we were coming at this really as a strong medical business, but things have kind of not gone our way as much as I had hoped. So our performance has been amazing. So I think that trickles down to our employees who look at this and go, you know, wow, I'm so glad we did this because, you know, our revenues are down, but our stock's up, our value's up, and thank God for Bitcoin.
Yeah, most definitely. What are your thoughts on all the new companies? How did you envision the game theory sort of playing out when it first started to happen? Now we've got a multitude of different companies adding Bitcoin to the Bitcoin balance sheet. I mean, Rumble's a big one that comes to mind, GameStop, and a bunch of others. But what are your thoughts on the 2025 sort of era right now of all these companies? There's new ones coming out, like Jack Mallers' company that just came out as well. A lot of stuff cooking.
Yeah. You know, frankly, it surprised me how long it took for people to do this. I was kind of shocked that we were actually the first out of the gate after MicroStrategy. And, you know, as an investor my whole career in the public markets and seeing how successful Michael Saylor was, that no one had really tried to follow in his footsteps until we did, was really surprising to me. And then there was this gap. I mean, it's really just starting to happen now. There's kind of this onrush of companies doing this. But it's still like took a year, you know, and it took us a while because we were dealing with a kind of a defiant SEC, and they kind of held us up and slowed us down, and you know that was an obstacle for us. Now the SEC is like a tailwind, so I think that's part of what's driving this too. It's just the regulatory winds are so much more favorable. So maybe that's what took people so long. But it's pretty amazing what's happening right now. There's just like, I was at Strategy World recently, for that amazing conference in Orlando, and it was just such a buzz. There are so many people there, all over the world, and we're starting to see it in so many countries looking to do this, and so it feels like it's happening. But the interesting thing still is, and this is the cynic in me, is just like they're mostly companies that need a lifeline. They're companies that need a way to kind of jumpstart their stock and get attention, which is great, which is fine. I just love to see more. I'd love to see some really big, healthy companies generating massive free cash flow, getting out there and doing this. And I think that's going to be incredibly exciting and just take us to another level. It's got to happen. I mean, we got a glimpse of that from Tesla, years ago. But when we can get kind of that redux, with big public market companies that have really big balance sheets, I think that's going to be massive.
Do you think the reason they don't is it's just not worth the risk for them? There's something that holds them back on the company side of things, or what do you think the reason is?
I think it's the board. I think generally a board is conservative and risk averse, and it's still considered kind of risky to do this. I think that some of the custody issues are important. I don't know if companies get that far. Big companies like a Meta or Google, have even thought about the custody aspect of it. But that is kind of an obstacle. I think the biggest obstacle really is that when the income statement's working, why worry about the balance sheet, right? Like if your income statement is growing and generating free cash flow and is working, why do you need to do more than that? Like, so what? So you're not earning your cost of capital. If you're a board the same thinking, you're just like, oh, we'll buy back our stock, or we have all this cash, we'll buy back our stock. That's kind of a useless exercise. I don't think buying back stock makes that much sense, or paying dividends is not tax efficient. So I think that there's kind of this syndrome of income statements working, ignore the balance sheet.
Yeah, most definitely. And speaking of the board, you guys just brought on Natalie Brunell, who we just had on last week. What was the thinking there? Had that been cooking for a long time? Is this something like the first of many where you're looking to bring on more of these Bitcoin people on? And was it also kind of like a statement to the other, like you were just saying, like to the other companies out there, if they're like, hey, this is something you're looking to go into this direction for, this might be a good way to start getting that going, is finding people like Natalie. I don't have experience in that world, so it's just coming from a curiosity angle for me.
Yeah, it was a no-brainer for us. I mean, she is a leader in the space. She speaks so well. She's such a great kind of advocate for Bitcoin, even though she's plays a relatively neutral role, interviewing people and having this, her podcast, all of her conference appearances. But she also has this really strong conviction in Bitcoin. And we're a Bitcoin first company now. We still have a lot riding on our healthcare business, but we need more kind of Bitcoin infused into our governance. And so it was important for us to have Bitcoin kind of more weighted in our governance. And we looked around and thought about who would be a great candidate, and she just seemed like a natural addition for us. And so far it's been great. She has an amazing network. She's incredibly helpful, and understands, what people want to see from us. And I think that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, most definitely. Where do you see? So you mentioned you're a Bitcoin first company. I myself, probably in the last, I came, just from the background myself, I came into the crypto industry in 2020 is when I had graduated college. I got a public health degree, and I was like, okay, now what? And I was like, okay, I started going to different jobs, and COVID was happening at the time. So I wasn't having a bunch of success. So I went and joined just like a restaurant just to make some money as the time was going. So I'm working at a restaurant, and it was the first time where I was like, okay, I would have to work here for a really long time to retire. This isn't exactly where I want to be. It's fine, I guess, for right now. And I remember speaking, and I just shared the story the other day, but I spoke with one of the main guys who was there. He'd been there for like 20 years. And we were talking about investing. Crypto was blowing up. Bitcoin was flying. Ethereum was expensive. Dogecoin was mooning, and everyone was like, dude, like these cryptos are really moving. And I was like, okay, I guess so this is where you can put your money in and pull out more or something like that. That makes sense to me. I probably should do some of that. And I had asked one of these guys who was one of the main guys at the restaurant about his investing strategy, what kind of things he looks at. Does he look at the stock market? And he was like, oh, no, I don't know anything. I'm never going to retire. And just like the most just deflated response. And I was just like, oh, wow. Okay. There's a lot. And that was not like an uncommon thing I had heard. And I was like, okay, so I need to really figure out what this is going to be. And so 2021 through 2023, I was just making videos on YouTube was my main thing. And it was really covering the crypto and NFT industry. And then in 2024, I joined Wolf. And we built up this account, and we're doing lots of spaces in the industry. And we started doing these Bitcoin spaces in about a year ago, actually. And I think at the last Bitcoin conference around that time, our spaces had like 50, 75 was a big deal. Now we've really gotten up there. We've met some really awesome people like Gary Cardone and Darkside and some of these guys, Simon Dixon, and we've built the spaces to like 3, 4, 5, 800 a lot of times. It's been crazy to say the least, but thank you. And during that journey, I've gone from like basically didn't realize Bitcoin was a specifically unique asset. I just thought it was the top altcoin to really learning it and understanding a lot about Bitcoin, and also adding a good amount to my personal holdings as well, which has increased my own conviction in it. And I'm starting to understand why all these Bitcoiners are so loud. And that has been crazy for me watching that whole journey. I would love to know a little bit about your Bitcoin journey and how it became a thing. What specifically about Bitcoin got you to be like, yeah, let's buy a lot of that asset in particular? Because that was what my burning question was when I started was, why are these billionaires buying just Bitcoin? Why not buy Solana? Like, why not buy this other coin? And they're like, nope, I'm good. I just want Bitcoin. And I was always like, it seems to have the lowest ROI, but then this cycle, been proven wrong. Bitcoin has very, very much performed just about everybody.
Yeah, it's a great story. And happy Bitcoin Pizza Day, by the way.
Yes.
We're in a restaurant.
Indeed.
Great question. There's so many aspects to that for me. It kind of connects to my experience, my career. Being an investor, tended to be contrarian, tended to focus on things that were underfollowed. That's where I saw the most opportunity. I also was always interested in kind of mega trends and being early in mega trends. So Bitcoin kind of fit into that thesis. I think my first exposure was early, like 2012. Went to Casares to meet him with a group of investors from Allen and Company. It's really early. It was food for thought for me, but it wasn't really something I was going to dive into. And I didn't invest in private. I didn't do private investments. I ran a public fund. We had about $4 billion under management, and we were focused on public companies. So it was more kind of informative for me to understand kind of what's coming down the pipeline. So I would meet with private companies all the time just to understand kind of the future. And I still do that. It was an evolutionary time. I think I probably started buying Bitcoin in 2017, but not in a serious Bitcoin maximalist way. And I frankly didn't really appreciate how powerful it could be at that point. I think the turning point for me was really this institutionalization wave, which is relatively recent. I mean, I'm newer to this than you in terms of my full conviction. And I think that there were a few things. Obviously, the ETF was a big deal, but also the Larry Fink orange pilling moment in BlackRock. As a public investor, that's really meaningful, and like you're like, wow, that really just happened. And then what MicroStrategy has done is also been really influential to me. And then obviously with the government now supporting Bitcoin in such a strong way. All of those kind of institutional factors has increased my conviction. And then something more recently has happened that I think we'll see more of, and that's this kind of this Bitcoin is starting to act as a safe haven. It's starting to act as a safe harbor during this tariff tantrum. Toward the end of the peak fear, Bitcoin was really outperforming and decoupling from the rest of the stock market. And typically it's kind of tied or correlated with tech stocks, and from time to time, obviously it outperforms a lot of times. But And so it's viewed as like a risk on asset. But it's interesting that it started to behave kind of the way we were hoping it would, right? Because my whole thesis is based on it becoming digital gold, and we all know that thesis has massive upside.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the more you see the institutionalization, the more you see it acting kind of like digital gold, you're like, wow, there's a lot of upside here. And so I don't spend, frankly, a lot of time looking at other crypto. I just focus on Bitcoin. I do have that view that it's really, there's no second best. And I love that expression. So I think that it's just breaking away, like from everything else, gold, everything. And so I just want to stick to that thesis, and it's working. It's being reinforced.
Yeah.
Which great feeling, and so happy that our company was early in the Bitcoin treasury wave. We were the second, as I said, U.S. public company to do this. We're now like the fourth largest U.S. Bitcoin company on the public company on Bitcoin standard. We own close to $500 million of Bitcoin, and we're really really pumped. Yeah. So it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to the future.
Oh man, yeah, that is some wild stuff. And I see also here, Uncle Dividend, give us a shout. Absolutely, yeah, it's great to have Eric on. 100%. If you're enjoying the conversation, by the way, and you're on X, please retweet the stream, let people know, tag a friend, and definitely follow along with what Semler is doing, and give Eric a follow. And his stuff should be tagged right above our faces. And if you're on YouTube, right below in the description here.
Awesome, great.
Yeah, absolutely. So so generally when you meet with like your peers and people in your world, are they like asking you questions? Are they curious about Bitcoin? Are they telling you this is ridiculous, it's just a wave, you're going to be wrong in a year? Like, what is the general energy, I guess, that you're picking up from them?
Yeah. So when you say my world, you mean like traditional finance?
Yes.
Yeah. That is half of my world, actually, because I'm still very active in that world. Yeah, it hasn't changed a lot. I think human beings are influenced by price action. So like the fact that it's acted well, I think you get a lot of traditional finance people buying Bitcoin, but not really knowing what it's about. It's just a good trade. Price, the chart looks great, whatever. They're not like they're not there for the long run, and they're gonna sell if the chart starts to go the wrong way. So that's kind of that hasn't changed that much to me. I think there's like maybe some nibbling going on with some of the institutional investors in my world, but in general, I haven't really noticed a change in my peer group. But I think that they know who I am, and that that I'm a contrarian, or that I like to think independently of others and not follow the herd. So I don't think they're that surprised that I did it. But I think that it's not a consensus trade by any means. And by the way, that's the best aspect of this, because it just shows you how early we are. And this happened to me with so many stocks. Like I've talked about this before, but like Netflix was one of these stocks. There were so many like this where, you see how strong this story can be. How strong the management team is there. You support them. You're a lone wolf crying in the wilderness. Vox Clamantis in Deserto. That's the Dartmouth theme, and that's where I went to college. And so you're there by yourself for a long time. And you see something that others don't see, and they're short the shit out of the stock. And the management comes to New York for a group lunch, and every short in the room is just attacking them. And they can't wait for this meeting to end. It's unbearable. And then you get some people who are hostile toward you because you own the stock, and then you take a lot of shit, and then you have to defend it yourself. And it got to the point once where Reed Hastings, who was founder of Netflix, said to me, "You're the only investor I really want to talk to." And
Wow.
I'll never forget it. I went into his office in California, was out there, and he said, "I'm just sick of this stuff. You're the only guy I really want to talk to." And so the end of the story, or where we are today, is that it's one of the most popular stocks to own in the stock market. And, it's the most beloved stock. Shorts are very small in this thing, and it's just become a darling in the stock market, and it shows you what will probably happen with Bitcoin.
Wow. That is a cool story. I love that. I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that.
And there's been a bunch of those, and then those are the best stories, because you can make incredible amounts of money, but also there's just this incredible reward of being right, this intellectual kind of the challenge of that, and the reward of that is also really valuable.
Yeah, most definitely. I watched a bunch of Michael Saylor, and I remember when I was trying to get over the hump of, I understood it, it made sense in my head, but something that's holding me back from deploying a position. I had even watched like these big finance guys like Ray Dalio, who are all over the YouTube world. They're going on all these podcasts, and they've been on and they've gone on podcasts for years now, and so you can kind of see their development as well with how their thoughts are to like risk assets, or to the anti-monies like Bitcoin and gold. And about a year ago ish, I think I started to see a bit of a shift in how they talked about it, even from a portfolio perspective. Like Ray Dalio was going on and went on a couple podcasts and was like, yeah, like I'm thinking it might be better to hold a larger position than we thought in the anti-money assets like gold and Bitcoin. He was like, more than people think. He was like, and people are radically changing their portfolios actually. And I started to see more and more of that. And then, like you said, Larry Fink, talking about Bitcoin going to $700,000, and you're like, okay, they're saying this and they're buying it and they've made an ETF. I'm like, is this too good to be true? Like, I guess it would be stupid looking back in 10 years if it just happens exactly like they're saying, to have been like, oh yeah, we saw every single sign and we slept on every single one of them. I mean, that to me was like, that was kind of one of the factors that got me to say, okay, I need to have a certain number of BTC where I'm like, okay, this is whatever percentage of the net worth that I have that I'd be happy with should Bitcoin fly to $200,000 tomorrow, which is the only asset that I'm worried about it doing. And the fact that it has a finite supply puts it in a category that is just different than any other asset. Eventually, there will be no more slices of the pizza for people to buy. It'll be very hard to get to a Bitcoin. And that was like one of the most powerful concepts for me.
Yeah, that's great. And I think also what's interesting is you do have people who say it's up so much, how can I buy it here? Right. Yeah. And that's very true with stocks too, right? Sometimes you could say that about Netflix. It went on this great run, and you're like, well, I can't buy it here. It was, it was at $45 a share. So, yeah. But you have to kind of look forward. You have to think about, where are we? And in some ways, is this a better entry point? Right. And, the entry point at obviously lower is better, but it's harder to see maybe where it's going then. And you have to be incredibly bold and courageous, which is great. And I applaud people for doing that. But then there's kind of there are these different kind of stages. And then we're in a stage now that's still early and still has massive upside, but the risk reward is better, I guess. It's less asymmetrical maybe in that sense, but still incredibly powerful upside.
Most definitely. What advice do you have for investor people who, I mean, you've got a pretty extensive history in investing, especially in like tech investing, and like you just said, like looking forward into the future and being able to picture and put things together and say, okay, yeah, let's move that direction. Let's put some capital that direction as well. What kind of things do you look for? What are things to add to like your strategy, especially for long term? A lot of people in our world and our spaces are trading the markets as well, which is fine. But I'm sure a lot of them trade so that they can get that extra money and toss it into these long-term investments as well. So what advice do you have that generally comes to mind?
Well, I'm not giving any financial advice because I do change my mind on stocks. And so I don't want to, say something and then, be out of it in a year or two. Or whatever.
Sure.
People say, I thought you like that. I think, it's hard to ignore some of the major trends that are interesting to me, like AI and just how that unfolds. And, there's this kind of constant search for the next great AI story. And so I spent a lot of time looking at that. I also spent a lot of time in the online sports betting space, like the stocks in that world. I'm pretty close to a lot of the players in that space, and I think there's some interesting ways to invest in that kind of long-term thing. So that's something that's interesting to me. And I also like to invest internationally. So I'll look at a lot of different geographies. I own a stock in Italy that I have a lot of excitement about, and it's in the online gaming space. And so I'm a curious person, so I'm always looking for opportunities. I think there definitely are stocks that can go nuts every year, right? But there's obviously stuff that's not in crypto that can actually perform really well. And so I think that you need to look for those opportunities as well.
Most definitely. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And yes, definitely no financial advice here.
Yeah.
But I think that perspective is important. What are your thoughts on current state of regulatory environments with the new presidency? Like you were saying a few minutes ago, we've got an entirely different now approach and energy towards crypto, and especially Bitcoin. But I guess just general thoughts on it, and then also where you see it going. I guess how are you feeling about it today versus maybe expectations a few months ago, and then where are you thinking we're going here?
Yeah. So when we first announced our Bitcoin treasury strategy a year ago, and sought kind of to put an ATM in place, an offering to sell shares to buy Bitcoin. The SEC made it really difficult for us. They asked a lot of questions. They kept, sending us, more rounds of reviews. It probably took 3 months before they approved it, and it was frustrating. That was probably, I can't remember the amount we were looking for, maybe $50 to $100 million of ATM. We just submitted post-election our first ATM kind of shelf offering proposal to the SEC, shelf filing. It was for $500 million. We did that, recently, and there was no review. It came back kind of like instantly. You're good. No questions. First we didn't get like a whole set of questions we had to respond to and give them time to to react to. So it was like night and day. And I'm thrilled about that. I think that that's the way it should be. And we feel like we're in a very favorable environment regulatorily, I think that's a great tailwind for us. But that's just that's the best example I can give you of how things have changed. I think that we really need to see kind of these big money center banks like JP Morgan and Bank America, get into custody. I think that'll eventually happen. I don't have a good feel for what the timing of that is, but I think that that's a really important development, and I assume it's going to happen. It just, it's hard to know where that stands.
Definitely. Yeah, wow. That is a crazy story. Going from being like, okay, here we go, guys. Like you submitted your 800 page thing that we need. We're gonna have another 500. You're not gonna sleep the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, head on a swivel. You're just like, no way.
Do you think that's dangerous anyway for other companies? Like it's almost too easy now for crypto companies. I saw what's his name, Bo Hines. I think he went on the Anthony Pompliano podcast and spoke with him for a little bit. And he was like, hey, we want people to come up here, give us their thoughts and talk to us. We want to be able to help if we can. Do you think too much is a problem? I guess, yeah, how do you feel in the current environment now for other companies as well who are trying to get involved? I know you mentioned you guys are just Bitcoin. There's all these crypto companies who are also coming up, and a lot of people are nervous. They're like, okay, there was plenty of scams in crypto before. Now with this kind of environment, it might get worse. But there are companies who believe they're doing something really good, and now their access to help is going to be infinitely easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with a lot of kind of Wall Street frenzies, sometimes things get, overheated and frothy, and absolutely there's, a correction and a shakeout. And I think that you have this risk that, this concept of MNAV, where, your stock, if you're a Bitcoin treasury company, your stock trades at a premium to your Bitcoin holdings. We can talk about why that is the case, but that's a really important aspect of this, is to, to have the highest MNAV you can. I think as you get just a proliferation of these Bitcoin treasury companies, you'll probably see, I would think, a narrowing of that MNAV, just because there's so many companies. And investors might say, why does this company need to just to trade at a 4 times MNAV or whatever? And that's kind of my Wall Street antenna telling me that. And so I think what's really important is to kind of justify the MNAV, and you can do that in a bunch of ways. What for us, we're one of the most levered. We have the most debt, basically, as a percentage of market cap or Bitcoin holdings than all the Bitcoin treasury companies. So if you believe that, financially, in terms of real finance, if you believe that Bitcoin is going higher, then the more levered you are, obviously will outperform. And that's important. I do also think that scale is important. So we have good scale. I'd like to have much better scale. And a lot of these companies, don't have that scale. It's going to take them a while to get to, where we're at, and we're going to keep going, beyond that. So I think having scale is important for a number of reasons. One, it allows the larger institutions to buy your stock. So there's a lot of the big mutual funds can't own Bitcoin outright, can't own Bitcoin spot, can't own the ETF. So they can only own kind of stocks exposed to Bitcoin, and that's been a big driver for Strategy's stock, I think, institutionally. And I think we have that same opportunity, that if we can get to a certain size, we'll be one of the few, with scale, and that institutions can own. So that's really important. Also, scale allows you to crack into really important high yielding markets like the preferred stock market, where only Strategy really is right now. So we've done a convertible. We did one in February, which is great. Like, that's a great step for us. We did a $100 million convertible. It was nice. Oversubscribed, and that the reason that's great is because it allows you to buy Bitcoin with a high yield, right? We'd love to buy Bitcoin mostly with our cash flow, but we don't generate enough cash flow to move the needle in terms of our Bitcoin holdings. We will hopefully, we'll continue to do that, and we will hopefully generate more cash flow than we've been generating these days. But we really think that, getting into the preferred market, getting into the, more into the convertible markets will help us kind of increase our Bitcoin yield, and that's a really important factor for us, and that will help us maintain a stronger MNAV. And that, so those are really important. There are other things you can do to maintain a strong MNAV, but those to me are kind of the key ones.
Wow. Did you ever think, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that you'd be in this position, there'd be an asset like this, Bitcoin, there'd be this type of community where it is passionate and loud, but it's backed by something that is at its core just so unique to anything else that we've got? It is beautiful. Like, the way Semler talks about it is like an art form. And it truly is a special asset. And it gets me thinking there's something different about Bitcoin here. And for people who are open to it, at least, I think anyone could understand it. But did you ever think you'd be in this position? Like, where were you at 10, 20 years ago? What kind of mindset were you in versus today?
No, definitely not. I spent, as a hedge fund manager, when we were one of the largest TMT funds when I started out, my first 7 years, I think we were one of the top independent TMT funds. My goal was just to stay out of the limelight, stay out of the press, below the radar. That's who I am, and that's seemed like the best place to be. I'm not a promotional person. So that's why it's such a surprise to me, because there is a lot of promotion involved here. Unfortunately, I don't love that. I'd rather leave that to somebody else. But I'm more about kind of just, making a great investment, sticking with it, and letting your bat do the talking. I play baseball, so I really believe in that kind of concept. Let your bat do the talking, show it through action. And that's what I really believe in. But I understand that there's more to it than that. That people want to hear from you. Like today, they want, that social media is really important to it. And I get that. And we'll do a better job of that probably over time. But I think at the end of the day, substance conquers everything else.
Wow.
And just on Michael Saylor, I think he like you said, it is an art form. He is he is obviously like a he's a religious figure in some ways to me. Like he is somebody that is just once in a lifetime. You don't see people like him come around too often in our civilization's history. And the thing that there's some personal attributes of his that are just remarkable that I didn't know, obviously, until I got to know him. But he has this incredible ability to connect with just the average person. He's not an elitist. He's just and I think that has to do with his upbringing. He didn't grow up like a rich kid or anything. And so he makes the time for whoever. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, he wants to get the message out. He's not kind of like, judging people based on how much they're worth. He's really about this revolution of really bringing in it's kind of like a populist movement. And he's completely, he's a down to earth guy who wants everyone to benefit from Bitcoin, large and small. And I don't know if a lot of people know that about him. He is a true blue believer in the common person succeeding. And I think that is something that we should really, appreciate in him.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Yeah, I was going to say, I definitely don't know him as well as you do. I think I met him like one time, very briefly, at the Bitcoin conference last year. And it was funny because I walked right past him and I kind of was like, wait, what? Was that him? And he had no, well, I'm sure there was security somewhere. I didn't see them right around him. I'm sure they were like, probably like in disguise or something. He just was strolling around. And I don't think many people realized it was him for a second. And then like all of a sudden people were like, wait. And then a bunch of people came up. And then he just sat there for like an hour and a half, just somewhere random in the Bitcoin conference on the floor, and just talked to people, took 1,000 pictures and selfies like that. Willing to answer the same question over and over again. Totally patient. And I was like, he does have a great way of engaging with the average person. I watched a series from years ago with him and Robert Breedlove talking about money and just trying to explain these things and like how they think about this at a very core level. And I got the same sense from him. And it is interesting too. You mentioned he seems almost like a religious figure, and it's fascinating to me. I had just converted to Christianity like a year-ish ago or something like that. And so religious figures were pretty interesting topic for me, I guess you could say. And, I guess you notice that you have like, the amount of hate that Saylor has generated online because they're like, this guy is top blasting. All he does is buy the top. This guy is going to be the reason Bitcoin crashes to zero. This guy's so selfish. Insert every single thing. And then you've got the other side of the aisle saying, no, what are you talking about? Like, this guy's actually way ahead of his time. And in 5 years, you'll figure out why, kind of thing. But why is it you think that that's the case? I mean, just the amount of divisiveness that there is when someone makes a claim, sticks with it. It's not like he's hurting it. He's just kind of like buying a bunch of Bitcoin, telling people why he believes in it so much. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to go buy some more Bitcoin.
Isn't that like the story of history when you have a new trend and that goes against the status quo? You get that kind of reaction from the mainstream. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? And it's people just don't like change, and the establishment is this like very powerful inertial force, and it's hard to battle that. And we've seen it throughout history, and he's just he's leading another movement that is facing that kind of resistance that will probably win out, and then he'll become universally beloved. But it takes time, obviously. And the other part about him is just like super altruistic. You're thinking to yourself, like, why is he trying to get so many companies to do what he did? Isn't that competition? Like, they're gonna hit their stocks, not his. He doesn't care about that. Like, he wants everybody to do this. He thinks it's great for Bitcoin. It's really what he cares about, and making Bitcoin succeed. And I agree with him too. I think that is such a huge catalyst for Bitcoin to have corporations use their balance sheets to buy Bitcoin. I think makes so much sense, and I'm all for it. And I'm thrilled that we were number 2 in the U.S. to do it, and I feel like that's an important part of history. But I'll be thrilled if that this trend just gets stronger and stronger.
Yeah, most definitely. I think it will. You'd mentioned you're a big baseball player. Were you playing? You play baseball now? Or were you talking about back then? Are you still a big baseball player?
I played catch with my son yesterday. He's playing baseball.
Oh, he does. Where does he play? That's awesome.
I'm not gonna say.
Oh, yeah.
But he is a college player. But baseball's been a big part of my life. I don't play anymore. I did play in the 40 and over league and led off and had a really good average, but then I tore both of my hamstrings stealing bases. So that didn't last very long. But I'm a bit obsessed with baseball.
Stealing bases. That is an interesting way and reason to tear both your hamstrings.
Yeah.
Wow, that is funny. That is funny.
I went too far with it. I played 1 year at Dartmouth.
Okay.
And I decided to focus on other things after that. I ended up playing on the squash team, but just really into sports.
Yeah, I played. That was like my journey was from like 10 years old or so. I wanted to play college soccer. I want to play college soccer, or I want to play pro soccer. And then eventually I made it and played at USC Aiken in South Carolina. And I had torn my ACL the year prior, which got me out of another situation, which would have been a pretty crazy big school. And I was excited. But then I tore my ACL, ended up having the full recovery and made it with like a week left in college tryout season. And the first offer I was given, I took it, I ran with it. And a year later, I tore the other ACL. And I was
man, I'm so
I guess that's not the move. But then it pushed me to weightlifting and it pushed me to other things. And eventually it got me here. So I guess it's all right. But kind of going there on baseball, are you it's probably the cheesiest question ever. It just kind of comes to mind. But are you someone who is more in favor of the load everything up, go for the home run grand slam, or more for the let's stack bases, let's go, let's just make sure we get on base? As far as like an investing standpoint and maybe kind of how you view the world, they probably both work. They both get you points. It's just, I think, more of a mentality thing on how you choose to hit the ball, I guess.
Yeah. I'm a bit of both. I in baseball, I'm definitely old school. I coached for many years. I coached really advanced kids in high school baseball for about 15 years during the summer. I started a program in the Bronx to help underserved kids get college baseball scholarships. And I had a facility with it was mostly focused on Dominican kids in the Bronx. And I helped hundreds of kids get into college through baseball. And I coached a lot of these guys for years and a lot of time on the baseball field. And I believe strongly in I'm very much kind of fundamental, small ball, a lot of bunting, none of this the stuff, shorten up, 2 strikes. So I was pretty strict that way. I didn't like to see anybody flip a bat or anything like that. So I was a tough coach, but I loved it. It was fun, and I was able to help a lot of kids. But in investing, I think it's a little different. I think I like the barbell approach to a portfolio where you have some singles and doubles, and then you have some home runs. Maybe they're smaller positions. Hopefully they're home runs. Sometimes they're zeros. But I like kind of having kind of a mix of stuff. I'm also oriented toward value stocks. I like things that trade at low multiples that have potential to trade at higher multiples. But I also like things that are growing fast and have this huge runway ahead of them, and it's part of the mega trend. So I'm kind of open-minded that way.
Very cool. And I had no idea about the baseball stuff, like the actual baseball stuff, you coaching and stuff like that. That is very cool to hear. And no, I appreciate you sharing that with me. What kind of things did you pull from that experience, working with kids, getting them into college, and getting them into the next stage of life?
Can't tell you how incredible that experience was for me to see kids really who were first generation. A lot of them couldn't afford to get to the game. I had to drive a lot of them. We pick them up in a van at 6 in the morning and go out to the tournament all weekend. We be there all day. We usually would win the tournaments. go down to Georgia and Florida, and win those tournaments sometimes.
All right.
We were really, and we were really the only, in most cases, we were really the only team of color. And so we ran into a lot of shit, and especially down south when we play. There were times when people would cheer. We had a team of like 8 and 9-year-olds, and we were in the finals against an all-white suburban team, and in New Jersey actually. And it got into extra innings, the finals. These kids are really little and young, and the parents on the other side started cheering USA against us. And all of our kids were U.S. citizens.
Wow.
And so and they were just looking like, these kids are, why are they cheering USA against us?
Yeah.
And it can get quite divisive. And those types of experiences, we've had many like that. A lot of stuff where you're like, God, we got to help these kids. When I first started the program, we went down to Georgia. I started when the kids were young, and as they got older, we started traveling down to big tournaments and helping them get recruited. And coaches from colleges would be there watching us play, and I was like so excited for this. Like, these guys, I've known these kids since they were like 6 years old. Now they're going to go to college and they get a college scholarship. And we would crush other teams, but the college coaches from big schools, like we've all heard of, had no interest in our players. And I was like, this is many years ago, and I'm like, I'd ask them, I'm like, why? What's wrong? And like, oh, well, they can't get into our school. Why would I spend any time scouting? And in some cases they were right, like their SAT scores were low, etc. So we started an SAT program. We started tutoring them. We got them like the best tutoring, and all of a sudden that changed things. They started to get into these schools, and we became a program that was like high on the radar of every major university and baseball program. And now, still today, we have several players, not many players, who are, top draft picks. Some are in the pros. We have one, starting for the Detroit Tigers right now. And so, like, it's just been that whole journey has been amazing for me.
Wow, that is the coolest story. And then, you get slammed in the face, and then you're like, okay, we'll do that then. We'll get him into the door still.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
What a story. What a story. Wow. Well, listen, I think that's a cool place to stop, actually. I think that was a great story, and I learned a ton in this conversation, and I appreciate you sharing a lot of these. I had no idea which direction we were going to go with it, and so I appreciate you kind of playing ball with me and playing catch with me a little bit here, and doing this with me. So, was there anything that you think that is worth sort of leaving the audience with, or anything that you have coming up that you wanted to let people know? I know the Bitcoin conference is coming up here in literally a week or something. We'll be up there. The whole Wolf team will be there. And a lot of people in the spaces are excited about it. They've been talking about it. They're like, we need all-time highs by the conference. It would be epic. There's going to be so many announcements. So everyone's looking forward to the conference. But anyways, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Nothing. I think you covered a lot of the really great stuff. It was really fun to talk to you. Conference next week. I'm going to be busy as hell. I've got incredible scheduled meetings. I don't know how I'm going to do them all. I have like 2 at the same time every hour. But, it's going to be crazy. But I am speaking on the main stage on Thursday. I think it was 3:50 p.m. And so looking forward to that. But there's just so much going on, and it's going to be a great week.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on, like I said, and hopefully we'll have you back on at some point, and maybe we'll run into you at the Bitcoin conference. In between the 2 meetings you've got booked at the same time. And
all right, all the best.
Awesome. All right, everyone, thank you all for watching with us. Be sure to give him a follow and follow him the journey, and we'll catch you guys all in the next one.